Hi everybody, welcome to an incredibly different kind of Alan Robson Night Out Ghost Hunt. Kenny is with us, he's driving at the moment.
Yay!
And he's sausage sandwiched up, he's in a good mood. We do look after the crew well. Hollywood McShane has just joined us from his place and he's got all the kit and we're hitting the road. We can't get into places, so we thought if we can't get in, we can get around. So we're going to some of the places that maybe we're going to do full ghost hunts at in the fullness of time. And we were heading out into the darkness, which is fully lit at the moment. It's going to be a very, very different trip. But we're going to tell you some tales. We have an incredible ghost story that we're going to share with you because it may have impact on what you end up buying for Christmas. We're going to just point the camera out the window and I'm going to tell you that story right now. Now, as we're travelling, there's one thing that is synonymous with Christmas, and that's the telling of a ghost story. And I've got one for you that may just unsettle you a little bit this time of year. This is the story of the Christmas gift. Have you been bought, or are you giving something that you've bought, perhaps from a second-hand store or an antique shop? Many people will. But you have to be concerned about something that is particularly chilling, and that's a tale of spiritual attachment. Now, this is, in essence, when someone gives you a present and there literally is a ghost attached to it. So you end up getting far, far more than you bargained for. One of the most famous stories of this kind was a chair that belonged to a brute of a man called Edmund O'Brien. It was his chair. He'd bought it at a street market. It had been falling apart, and lovingly in his garage he restored it. He pinned the thing back together. He changed the upholstery, and he then sat on it for over 30 years. Maybe it was the manner of his death that had tied him to that chair inexplicably. Big Ed, as he was known, from the 1930s to the late 1950s, he was a bit of a thug. He avoided work. He managed to avoid being called up for the army. Yet people were frightened of him. He'd been known to give people a hiding. He'd robbed a few shops. And in 1964, when frankly he was certainly past his best and his criminality had all but stopped, he took to running a street gang of kids, stealing to order for him, and he paid them with drugs. Well, a new gang moved onto the local council house estate near to where he lived, and he began running things there. So Ed made his mouth go, threatening this new gang and threatening that newcomers should know how things were here. Well, 15 years earlier, that might well have been the case. But now his only gang were a few unruly street kids, yobs, scroats. The other gang, made up of men, sent him numerous warnings, and then 3 of these men broke into his house. And as he watched TV, they kicked his chair over. His head cracked off the edge of the hearth, and he was dead. Now, from that moment on, wherever the chair went, so did the huge, dark presence of Ed O'Brien. A woman bought it from a Salvation Army jumble sale, and after 3 months of her house being badly haunted, she gave it to a friend. 3 days later, her friend was pushed down a flight of stairs. 2 days after that, her front door slammed onto her fingers, breaking all of them. And the very last straw was when she was sleeping in the chair. She felt a weight on her, as if a huge man had just sat on her lap. He'd fallen back onto her and winded her. She was wide awake, but she couldn't move. She couldn't get out from under this huge weight. She screamed until neighbours with a key came in just in time to see a dark shape, the dark, lumbering figure of a man, walk off from the chair through the living room wall. The friend who gave her the chair finally admitted that she'd suffered a haunting when she had it. So on November the 5th, the chair was given to kids for their bonfire, and it was burned. Both ladies watched it burn and swear that in the flames they heard a voice roaring in anger that his chair was gone for good. And after it burned, he was gone too. So you think, well, that's just a one-off, it's a coincidence. Well, in Blythe in 2009, Ray Atkinson bought a jewellery box for his wife off the internet. For something covered in gemstones, the price of £58 seemed far too little for something that looked so dynamic. Still, he won the online auction and it was his. Online auctions were brand new then, quite exciting. He overlooked one line in its description. Right at the very bottom in small print, it read, "This has been known to bring bad luck to those who own it." But 3 days later it arrived just in time for Elaine Ray's wife to celebrate her birthday with this beautiful jewellery box. Ray worked night shifts in the factory, and after taking his lady for a birthday meal, got back to the house in readiness to go to work, only to find cupboard doors open, clothes strewn across the floor, and the strong smell of a very pungent floral perfume. At first he presumed that they'd been burgled, but nothing had been taken. Even money that they'd hidden in some of the drawers was still there. So off he went to work, only to get a phone call from Elaine around 11:30 at night. She was screaming, crying at how she had seen this see-through woman cursing at her. The woman had eventually leapt at her, pushing her down into a corner where she'd banged her head. Ray came home, and after 30 minutes he'd calmed her down and she was off to try and sleep. Yet it was Ray who would be next to get a shock. He walked into the room.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
And it's off.
It's off.
Anyway, back to the story. He walked into the bedroom just as it was getting late, and there, on his wife's back, was a sheet stuck to the back with a pool of blood on it. He woke her up to make sure she was okay and gently peeled the sheet off. All over her back there were scratch marks, marks impossible for her to have done to herself. She was in shock, sobbing and barely able to talk. He sat her in the bath and, using a warm shower, swabbed all of the excess blood off her back. And as she sat there, he looked into the bathroom mirror, and there was a face of a woman in her 50s, covered with makeup and bright red lipstick. He literally fell off the side of the bath, shouting, "Whoa! What the F was that?" He stood up and looked into the mirror again to see that figure behind him sliding out of the bathroom door. He searched the house, and it was the jewellery box he noticed first. The top of it was covered in blood, and on a white goat skin rug that had also dark red bloodstains on it. He bent down to pick it up, only to be hit hard on the back of the head with a silver picture frame. On turning around, he saw this old hag of a woman holding the jewellery box, screaming at him, yet he couldn't hear a word from her. It was as if she was on mute. His wife, in a dressing gown, entered the bedroom and saw exactly what he was seeing. Just then, the woman disappeared. Elaine ordered her husband to get dressed, and they both grabbed the jewellery box and dived into the car, heading south. As the car drove along, passing fields and trees and road signs and parking bays, Ray looked into his rear-view mirror, and he saw the face of the old woman in the rear-view mirror, her eyes glaring menacingly at him. Her mouth was moving, but still he couldn't hear a word she was saying. Just then, the car lurched to a stop on the south end of a bridge. Elaine jumped out, carrying the jewellery box, and ran across to the edge of the bridge as Ray turned the car around. By the time he did that, Elaine was halfway across the bridge, and she hurled the jewellery box into the water. Ever since they did that, their home was theirs, finally. And you know, it was barely 10 years ago that the Northeast had probably its ugliest case of spiritual attachment, and it was attachment to a small child. Michael and Lynn Story had a little boy called Lucas, who was 5 then. They lived together in Southwick, and after weeks asking him what he wanted for Christmas, he declared he wanted a garage for his toy cars that he'd inherited from his grandfather. It was a large collection of corgi cars. We all had them. None with boxes, because we knacked them first. We always did, not knowing that in years to come they could have made us a fortune. And the cars had all been heavily loved by his granddad and by his dad before him. They were all scraped and scratched, like well played with toys are. Dad had visited every single toy shop, and they all had garages aplenty, but all of the cars were much smaller than those that Lucas loved so much. And then one day, one of his pals told him that there was a quite large toy garage in a sale at Miller's Auction Rooms in Newcastle, next to St James's Park. So on the day of the sale, him and his mate went down to check it out. Not only was it exactly the right size for corgi cars, there were also 30 more cars sold with it, all in perfect condition. This looked very high quality, yet on closer inspection, it was probably handmade in somebody's shed for a little boy by his dad. The painting of it was immaculate, the road signs outside, a little barrier with a man selling tickets, a hoist to lift cars up to different floors, and a way for them to slide all the way to the bottom and back out onto the road. All that Michael knew was Lucas would love it. A few bidders tried for it, but £70 got it for him. The two men were really chuffed, and it took both of them to get all of the toys back to the car. There was also a bag full of little batteries to light up signs on the front and back of the garage. Every time they looked at the purchase, it looked like a better buy. Christmas came and went as swiftly as Christmases do, and Lucas was the happiest little boy in the world. He played with that garage all day and all night. Yet on Christmas Day, all of the electrics in the house went off. The only lights that they could see were the battery-lit lights of this small toy garage. During Christmas lunch, the whole family were sitting at a table when they clearly heard someone running about upstairs. Michael went up to check it out. He returned saying they must have just been hearing the family next door They must be having a Christmas do too. That night, they all went to bed and to sleep happy. It had been their best Christmas. All experiencing the nicest and most satisfying December the 25th that they'd ever had. Next morning, they get up and little Lucas is crying and noticeably not playing with the garage. On reaching him, they pulled up his chin to see that the poor little lad had a huge black eye. "What happened, son?" said his dad. "This nasty boy says the garage is his, and if I touch it again, he'll kill me." Michael looked around the room and everything was in place. Could this just have been the imagination of his little tot? But if that was the case, where did that shiner come from? Had he fallen, hitting his face? Just then Lynn raced in saying, "Lucas, have you got a friend in the house? I've just seen this bigger boy run upstairs." Michael raced upstairs. He checked every single room carefully until a small child pushed past him and ran down the stairs. He watched. The front door didn't open, but it did sound like it had slammed shut. The family had a conversation and Lucas said, "Daddy, if the garage is that other boy's, I want him to have it." He sounded really frightened. Lynn was just gabbling away. She couldn't believe that she had clearly seen a ghost. They left it a few days, but poor little Lucas never touched that garage again. And they took it out to Toys R Us in Gateshead, where he bought a new train set and loads of accessories in the sale. The problem was, things were still happening. During the night when everyone was in bed, you could hear somebody wheeling cars around a wooden floor. The noise worsened. You could hear the hoist from the garage rotating and metal cars skidding down from the top floor with a crash. On one occasion, little Lucas had picked up 2 cars to return them to the garage when in a split second, something hit him again, sending the poor tot spinning across the room and hitting the television so hard that the television stand tipped over backwards. Lynn saw a little lad spinning and demanded that her husband do something. Michael contacted a local spiritualist church first week of the new year, and they suggested that they make contact with the man who had sold the garage through the auctioneers. A phone number was passed over and Michael drove over to Baker to see a man who does house clearances. He said that he'd helped a man from Elsick clear his house after a fire that had killed his 8-year-old little son. He'd put all of the stuff that belonged to the boy straight into auction and he knew nothing else about it. Michael asked the man if he still had the phone number of the man who lost his child. This man, David Dodds, was now living in Yarm, but Michael did manage to catch him. At first, the father wanted to drive up to see his son's ghost in their house. Yet Michael explained the blind terror that his wife and their little son were experiencing and asked if instead he could just bring the garage down with all of the cars. This he did, and on handing it over, felt a huge weight ease from his shoulders. David spoke of how the body of his son, Jack, was burned so badly that his face was unrecognisable, and all from a scented candle on a windowsill. He showed Michael a picture of his son. Michael recognised it as the boy all of his family had seen. The toys were placed in the man's spare room, and the family were thanked. And just as Michael was about to drive away, they both heard noises coming from upstairs. The sound of toy cars being rolled across a wooden floor. David's face lit up as Michael politely made his farewells and bounded to the car. The door shut and they were finally free. This kind of spiritual attachment can happen anywhere, to anything. And although it's rare, it's very, very aggressive. Have you bought something recently and all of a sudden you're getting strange movements or noises in your own home? Because you never know what you're bringing home with you. Maybe the thing that you really, really wanted still belongs to someone who's dead and they're not ready to give it up. There in Yarm, David no longer has a spare room. His son Jack has that room to play with his toys. His father's caught him on video, recorded him, and not only that, they've caught glimpses of him racing around the room and giggling. But you have to remember, not every ghost is this happy. In 1988, in December, William Foster was killed in the US when he bought a chainsaw from the family of a man who had killed his wife with it. Little did he know that the killer had been given the electric chair. He also didn't know that after murdering his wife, he had used his brand new chainsaw to cut her up. Foster was using the chainsaw to cut wood for his fire in Bangor, Maine. His wife told a magazine what she saw. Will had cut most of the timber for the fire when he put down the saw, and then I heard the chainsaw fire up as he walked away from it, carrying the wood and putting it into our cellar. The noise startled him, and as I turned around, there was a grey figure carrying the saw, lurching towards him. I saw blood fire from his throat, and he was down on the ground. The saw, still running, was dropped on top of him, skin and fingers flying everywhere. I ran out and switched it off. The police didn't believe me about the figure. They put it down to accidental death from someone not used to using a chainsaw. But I saw this man clearly. And when I asked her what happened to the chainsaw, she said, I threw the damn thing in the sea. So just be careful what you buy this year. It may not be a loan. So, how better to share with all of you a similar type of thing? And let's face it, no one else on planet Earth will be doing the things that we do. Over the weeks and months to come, we have a few incantations and ceremonies that will open portals to the other side, that will help you send love and healing to members of your family. We got a whole host of things. If you've lost a friend or a member of your family, we have incantations that can bring you closer together. But at the present moment, we are cutting around very bendy and twisty roads, as you can probably tell the way that the camera's moving around. We're heading down to an area that is in the central part of the northeast, yet it's miles away from towns and cities. And why? Because this was the land where, during the Jacobite rebellion, the two sides were polarised. If you lived in the northeast, you had a decision to make. Do you support that southern king that takes taxes from you? Or do you support the Scots, who are essentially giving them two fingers, or one finger, depending on which finger symbol you choose? Now, in this part of the world, they were completely on the side of Scotland. And the people in the south, the king and his cohorts, hated the fact. And around places like this, quite often, villages were completely levelled. Sorry, we're dancing around again. But villages were completely flattened, people massacred, people wiped out. And the southern king said, those Scots, they've come down into the north and they're destroying our towns and villages. When in fact, the towns supported Scotland. So the English king destroyed his own towns and cities. Unbelievable, but that's what happened. And in this neck of the woods there, Kenny's doing a good job of avoiding oncoming traffic. He's managed to get at least a coat of paint between us, which is something. But we're very, very close to our first destination, and it's a place many of you will know because of one ghost story, but frankly there are half a dozen in this place. We're heading for a place that quite often when you travel here you go directly into fog. It's in a depression in the north and there's no signal, which is why we're glad to be able to record it for you. There's no signal and the fog falls into the depression so you can't see your hand in front of your face. We're going to be arriving very soon to a place called Glanceland, and the sat nav that has been playing up since the moment we put it on tells us, or has been telling us for the past 3 minutes, that we're a minute away, but there is the sign for it, Glanceland. So we're easing our way in there. It's a fabulous place to visit. You'll hear the stories if you don't already know them, and there's not much of a town centre, so I think you're going to have to turn left and park just beyond where this white van is on the edge. You see it, Kenny?
Yeah.
Because the main street, I believe, oh, there's a woman dressed in gypsy garb, ready for us. Oh, this is the Lord Crew Arms, I think. So park where you can now. Couldn't get through. Night Owls is too busy. You know the score. Anyway, here we are in the centre of Glanceland. Look at that. That's the original abbey. It's right next door to the Lord Crew Arms. This was a centrepiece for Jacobite insurrection. The people who lived here, and there's not many of them now, and there was probably the same number back in the day, because they haven't built loads of new houses. A lot of the houses here, if you look around, are exactly the same way they would have been back then. And they were all supporting the Scots. They're on the side of Scotland. Sick of the taxes. Why are we paying taxes to some bloke in London who's never even been up here, that we've never seen and we'll never see in our lifetime? Yet the Scots, they don't want to pay tax at all. And if we join the Scottish cause, maybe we won't have to pay tax. So you can see the temptation. Now, along here, come and join us. That building there is the Lord Crew Arms, and that window there is the window concerned. Now, it's all about a man. I know everybody says, I've heard the story of Dorothy Foster. Yes, you have. But that's not the main story. It's the one that everybody hangs their hat on. But it's about Tom Forster. Tom Forster was a general in the Jacobite army, and he was born and raised here. And he lived there. A sign of how well off he was back in the day. And he went off to fight. And his sister, not his wife like many believe, his sister stayed there and waited at that window and watches out of that window for him returning from the war. Problem was, he was captured and executed, and he didn't return. His brother Charles managed to escape. Charles Forster, he escaped off to France because the French were on the same side of Scotland. Dorothy remained, and her ghost looks out. And inside the pub, if you pop in for a jar, they're not ghost friendly, let me warn you, but there's a fireplace there that has like a big almost walk-in thing, and if you
just looked at it,
if you can go behind it, there's room to get behind it. Tom Forster, when the English troops came looking for him, hid behind that fireplace, and they were there saying, we can't believe we've missed him, we've got soldiers on every road. Well, they hadn't missed him. He was hiding behind a fireplace, and that fireplace is still there for you to see to this day. So, an amazing ghost story. One other thing that you have to come and have a look at is just over here. This is Glanceland Abbey. Glanceland Abbey has two hauntings, and there's a third that I'll tell you about later, but we'll be able to get in here. Here we go. Now this is beautiful. First of all, you know, we talk about how they're loyal to Scotland. All of these people here, Tom Forster, another Forster, because Forster's a big name in this neck of the woods. All of these people fought for Britain in the Great Wars, and they're being paid tribute to. This, however, is Glanceland Abbey. Now, look at this medieval looking building. And why? Because it's medieval. Look at that. We're talking 1200s here. You know, we're talking a bit of serious age. Now, in 1674, during the dissolution of the monasteries, we keep going back to the dissolution because it was a real big deal. King Henry VIII wanted to get divorced, so he created the Church of England essentially, and he said the Catholics all had to disperse. Now the Catholics were here for a while, and if you look at the shape of how the building is, you can kind of tell it's an old church. So the dissolution even reached Little Blanchland, and troops were sent to disperse the monks. Disperse them usually meant killing them if they didn't move. Dispersing was chase them away, and if you come back you're in trouble. So the story here is of the two monks that refused. They hid in coffins. There are piles of coffins, not just underground, but they had a few coffins for in case someone died, just kind of rough and ready wooden coffins. They hid in a couple of the coffins till the soldiers had gone. However, the soldiers rode down to other villages and came back through and saw that there was a fire cooking and people making food, and they came in and they killed the monks and put them back in the coffins where they were hiding in. And the spirits of those two ghosts are said not to walk this bit. It's actually around the side of the chapel where they're supposed to be, because the chapel goes, or the land for it goes right around the back. Loads of stories attached to Blanchland. It's one of those places where you really got to quickly get a feel of the place. Yeah, that's right. Well, as you can see, the cemetery's still being used, so you've got to show it absolute respect. And it was along here where the coffins were. They were up against the wall, just waiting for any locals that may pass. So, because they didn't have like an undertaker's business here, everything was done by the chapel. It's around here that the two monks are said to walk side by side, long robes, no hood on, bald pate with their heads shaved in monk-like fashion, are said to walk around the edges in the evenings, and they do it every evening apparently at exactly 7 minutes to 7, 6:53. Now I've been here at 6:53 and it didn't come out for me, but maybe they'll come out for you. But what if you're gonna have a place of peace, just look at this as well. Look at this building over here. When I followed their walk, and I did a promenade around the place, and the thing that I just loved was this extra building. Look at it. It's like a little miniature chapel. Beautiful place. Gotta watch the spikiness. It's just rubbish essentially, but at one time that would have been maybe a monk's enclave. You know, a little private place where you could get peace and tranquility away from the rest of the world. Love the idea of that. You get the odd rambler. And this is, how beautiful is Blanchland? I know we have a habit of being in cemeteries.
Yeah.
But
peaceful and quiet.
Peaceful, beautiful, deer, everything that you would need to be able to subsist back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, you could eat rabbits and you could fish from the streams, the salmon and what have you. All kinds of stuff. Now, there's a couple of other tales to be told here. Or the churchyard sprite. Let's tell you that story. Now,
Do it.
you just want to be cash.
Yeah.
We got places to show these folks, so let's rock on. When people talk about sprites, pixies and gobblers, you got any thoughts?
Well, I mean, they made some up, didn't they? I mean, there was a famous one where they're supposed to see them and then...
Or the fairies?
Yeah, and it was cardboard cutouts, wasn't it?
Yes.
But it fooled people for years. But it could have been little people, couldn't it? Couldn't it? It could be anything.
Well, you see, I've got a slightly different belief on it. And imagine, I'm going to take leprechauns as an example because nobody believes in leprechauns. Even those that have seen the film think, well, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
Leprechauns, right? What's the sign of a leprechaun?
Green.
Strange noises. Strange noises. Tiny footsteps running across a floor. People being pushed and shoved. People being touched. What's all that a sign of?
Could be a ghost.
Could have been a ghost.
Yeah.
So my belief is small spirit. People have labelled, and they give it a pretty, gentle image, so it doesn't frighten them. Oh, it's just the pixies.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that. It's just the pixies. I believe it's spirit. I believe it's always been spirit. Pixies, elves, goblins, leprechauns, because they all do exactly what ghosts do.
Yeah, they do.
And yes, they've given them an image, put a little hat on them, and leprechaun's got a shillelagh, and a pixie's got a little pixie hat, and he sits on a mushroom.
Yeah.
Well, that's just to make people feel better about something that they don't understand. That's what I believe.
Good idea.
Doesn't-
Good explanation, though.
Doesn't make it true. And it's rare you get a chance to talk about a sprite. So, I mean, they sell enough pop.
I was going to say, talking about a sprite, I could do that.
So they should exist. I'm tempted to.
See if it's open.
Would you like to go in? But you would need a mask, is the thing.
I don't think you do.
It's closed.
It's not.
Oh my God. You know the monk that walks around? How beautiful is this? We managed to get in. Let's do what we can where we can. You can see the old, look at the Gothic stair columns and everything. Look at the roof. Look at the, just look up, it's just amazing. This is a font on the site of the old well. So everything makes sense. Everything was done for a purpose. Tributes to people that have passed, people that have been important to the town and the village. And to be honest, it's just how much would it cost to make that window? And it's that particular window is dedicated to the Askew family, the MacDonalds and Croziers on the other side, Joyce Common over here, Wilfred Yale, Dorothy Common as well, Ernest Common. Real people that did real things that made a difference, and they're commemorated. And you know, whether you're Christian or not, you've got to give chops to the Christians for we're going to take money from poor people, granted, But we're going to create something like this, and it is absolutely stunning.
It's just amazing.
Now, you know, this is all to prove that God exists. The church believe that if you've created something like this, God must be real to generate the kind of faith that creates something like this. Now, I don't believe that personally, but you can imagine anybody that's relatively uneducated that hears there's this God in heaven that has so much power they can create these, not just here, but everywhere. Yeah. I mean, I can understand how a majority faith would come out of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong in believing. But please, whatever your faith is, believe in it. And if you believe it, enjoy it. Make the most of it. I'm not trying to knock anybody's religion. I'm genuinely not. I could be wrong. They could be wrong. Yeah. It doesn't matter. The fact is, to yourself be true, always. And I wouldn't ever want anybody to tell me what to believe. No. And I would never tell anybody what to believe. I would just say, question everything is always.
It is, isn't it? The bell.
Try not to draw attention by ringing the bell.
No. I'll just ring it and run away.
Let's just...
That would be funny.
Couldn't we? I could just ring it and... Look.
Probably find like 400 people with picks and staves.
Yeah.
They might think there's an invasion. There it is.
And as you look across from one place that's said to be haunted, you've got the Lord Crew Arms next door. I mean,
that was great going in there, mate.
But this is the kind of stuff we could only do during the day, isn't it? And also it's Christmas. So I once did a midnight mass thing in a church. I'm not a Christian, but the person I was with at the time was. And so I went in, and it was a beautiful thing, you know, singing Christmas carols and stuff, until the last 15 minutes when the pubs closed and all the drunks came in, throwing up on the back row.
Yeah, not to go in.
That wasn't so good. But, right. It's a modern building, but it's
called the White Monk.
It's on the ground. Well, there you go. The White Monk is the guy who was here. They say he's haunted, but there's two of them actually. The White Monk.
Maybe the S's fell off the end.
Maybe, who knows? But no, there used to be an old chapel there many years ago that was replaced when they built this. Now, before I was mentioning, this is in the 1300s. Why did they support the Scots? Because the king never came here. Now, after they had destroyed a few villages, King Edward came here. I think it was Edward the Third, I'm guessing. But Edward the Third came here, and he marched up and down. Now, they all hated him because they were all on the side of the Scots. But he walked up and down, and to his credit, he told the local people, "You said that your king would never visit you here. Well, here I am. I am your king, support me." And of course, he left back to London, never to return. Yeah. And they just said, "Stuff you, the Scots are here every 10 minutes. So it's kind of like the people that knock on your door for your votes. Yeah. You never see them on the day that they're...
every 4 years.
They want that, absolutely. There's one more place that I have to tell you about, and it's, memory serves, it's this way. It's a forest. It might be that. It is that.